What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hello, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with Julieta Comando, my co-host. What's going on, Jules?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Today's episode is titled The New Breed Entrepreneur with Ryan Auger. Ryan is a young real estate investor. His niche is storage facility space. And his niche within that niche is buying mismanaged or undervalued storage facility spaces and turning them around. He's also the marketing director of Auger Law. And I'm super excited for today's episode. At the end, and you're going to have to listen to the whole thing, he gives you 10 action steps. We give 10 action steps of how you can hockey stick your net worth from 0 to multiple 7 figures, like Ryan did in just under 6 or 7 years. So without further ado, here's Ryan. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, Ryan, is you are the new breed of entrepreneur to me, right? So right after I graduated law school, I definitely was like, I want to be a real estate developer, right? And back in the, I want to say it was the late 80s, early 90s, that was all the rage, right? But you read all these books on real estate investment, and then you're like the new breed. You, a couple of other guys I know. How old are you, first of all?
27.
Okay. At 27, you guys are doing things that it's kind of on its face simple, but it's not, right? Anything that seems simple is because somebody's put in a lot of work behind the scenes. So you've been out of school how long?
6 years.
6 years. In that 6 years, have you amassed a net worth of 7 figures?
Yeah. So I started out working as, an engineer, and over the course of 2 years, I got my net worth up. I was making 75 a year about on average working as a software engineer, and I maybe saved 20 grand total over the course of that whole time. I got my pilot's license. I was just messing around. I was having a good time living in Atlanta, spending a lot of money. And then I went off to start my own software company, and I had 20 grand in the bank account. I had a restaurant technology company. And so we put these little, if you've ever seen Ziosk at like an Applebee's, those sort of tablets, we had a competitor to those. We were in about 50 restaurants. And by the time COVID hit, so we raised some money for that. COVID hit, we're in 50 restaurants. Obviously, every restaurant stopped. Mm-hmm. They just shut down. But that 20,000 basically burned out to zero right as COVID was hitting. And I didn't get any PPP because I couldn't pay myself. I couldn't get any unemployment because I was self-employed. Like there was all the boxes that the stimulus checked, like I couldn't collect. So I went back into working as a software engineer and then as a product manager. And that's where I saved a ton of money. I saved, I had $50,000 to invest in my first deal because it was COVID. You really couldn't spend a lot of money. There was nowhere to spend money.
Right. So suffice it to say, how many self-storage deals are you currently in?
We have 4 self-storage facilities.
4 self-storage facilities. How many square feet?
A little over 100,000.
And I know personally, because I've looked at these deals with you, that you are a 50% owner of all of these deals, correct? Like as the operator of the deal.
Yeah, we're between 30 and 50%. And we put in, I put in my money and things like that. So between 30 and 50%.
Right. So you came up with this business model where you're the general partner. The money investors that come in are limited partners and silent partners, more importantly. And so what's brilliant about the model is in the 6 or 7 years you've been out of school, you've been able to develop this real estate net worth that, yes, it seems easy when we're talking about it, but it really does give a roadmap to people like, hey, you could go from 0 to multiple 7 figures in net worth in a very short amount of time if you do the plan, stick to the plan, and execute on the plan, and the plan is good. And that was kind of what I want to get into today with you, because I think you are the new breed of entrepreneur.
Going back a little bit, because I know you said in 2020, you went back to work as a software engineer and product manager and then saved up money. How did you find yourself in like the self-storage space specifically? Because I know that's mainly what you deal with. So it's just so interesting how you fell into that.
Yeah, so my uncle had a 50,000 square foot storage facility. He was all in it for less than $2 million. And 2021 hit, interest rates were very low. He sold the property for $4.5 million, low fours, $4.5 million around there, and more than doubled the value of the property, maybe 20x his investment. He goes, buys a house in Clearwater, Florida, and retires. But I realized, holy shit, this is an incredible opportunity. The people who bought his property doubled his rates day one. So he doubled his money and still there was meat on the bone for the next guy. And so what I did pretty much from then on, he had 50,000 square feet, was all in it for less than 2 million, sold it for about 4.2. I spent from pretty much the point at which I learned that he, literally within days of him telling me he sold it and the transaction closed, I was cold calling, making 15 to 20 calls a day. And it took me until about September of 2021 from there, so March to September, to find some deals that were really compelling, where someone like me with no real estate experience, someone who knew a relative in the asset class, could go out and raise money. So the deal had to be that compelling. And so really the story was I found two properties right next to each other, 50,000 square feet, just like my uncle's, bought them for $2.3 million. And they were doing $20,000 a month in revenue. The goal was within 3 months to be doing $27,000 a month, because it was just a simple, they were charging $60 for a storage unit. The guys down the road were charging $85. So those properties today are doing about $31,000 to $33,000 a month. They're worth between $4 and $4.5 million. So we did the exact plan, I shouldn't say we did the exact plan that my uncle did, but the point is our deal pretty much mirrored my uncle's deal very much. And it was a good enough deal that, again, someone with no experience could go jump in and raise money for it. If you have a deal that's that screamingly good, everyone says if you get the deal, the money will come. If you get a deal that good, then the money will come.
Tell the other part of that deal, right? So it closed in September. And then 4 months later, there was an offer?
So we went under contract for $2.3 million. And then we had brokers telling us, well, we could sell this for 3.6 the day we closed. And then they were like, okay, well, 4 million, low fours. It just got, and this was, when we were doing 27,000 a month in revenue rather than 31, 33. So 2021, early 2022 in particular, it was like, wow, this is the hottest market ever in real estate. Interest rates were zero and everyone, all the stimulus money had come in. The Fed had just bought all the bonds possible. So interest rates and there was no yield. So people were trying to get yield in real estate. And so we were getting offers at five caps for our property, which is kind of crazy because a couple of years ago, cap rates were all in the 6s and 7s. Really, it just means that people were willing to pay a 14 to 15x multiple for our real estate, maybe back in 2019. And today they're willing to pay a 20x multiple. So if you can buy anything for a 15x multiple and sell it for a 20, you don't have to do anything. You make a lot of money.
The arbitrage is there.
Yeah, right. If you get lucky and the capital flows come in. Now, the arbitrage, we're sort of seeing it. Interest rates are getting higher, so that it's pulling back out to levels that we sort of expected they would. And a lot of those sort of people who were buying those really, really high multiple deals, low cap rate deals, are starting to feel a lot of pain because interest rates are a lot higher now.
So it's funny because Jules is really hungry, right? And we talk about investing all the time. Believe it or not, I think what's awesome is, one, you moved very quickly into the space. I love the space, by the way. Self-storage space, to me, after being in New York during COVID, I love real estate, right? I think that true wealth in America is built through real estate. All the wealthy people I know, it's real estate related. And then they get into stocks. You can buy a lot of shares of Apple when you sell your one deal, and then you can kind of grow it from there. But the fact that you went into self-storage was really appealing to me because it's almost, in my worldview, one, it's immune to what happened to the people that were in residential and commercial. during COVID, right? There is no shutdown of self-storage space. There is no, oh, you're not paying your rent.
Yeah.
And it's largely unregulated, right? It's largely unregulated because you're dealing with chattel. You're not dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with their skateboards and shit sitting in self-storage, which I like.
Yeah, it's different than, the demand drivers for other types of real estate. Call it if industrial real estate and commercial real estate and retail are largely dependent on the broader economy. Self-storage has a lot of different demand drivers. Businesses use it. People use it to store. If you're in a household if you're downsizing to a smaller apartment, well, all of a sudden renting self-storage is cheaper on a square foot basis than renting an apartment. So that's a way to cut back. There's a lot of different demand drivers in it. But the biggest thing for me that I think that, I think about this because my dad is a personal injury lawyer like yourself. The biggest thing I think about is, personal injury lawyers are looking at, from far away, nobody knows how far away, but they're looking at this sort of Damocles, this thing that's going to end the business. And the thing that's going to end the business is going to be driverless cars. If
Technology,
90 to 95% of PI lawyers, they're all targeting car accidents. Well, do you want to be in a business where technology is actively working to end your business? That's what being an office investor would be like, and
interesting.
Real self-storage, industrial real estate. If the goods are ever going to be delivered somewhere and a plumber ever needs a place to put his plumbing supplies or his car, you'll need self-storage, you'll need multi-tenant industrial. As long as Pepsi still needs a place to bottle 50 million bottles a day, you'll need industrial. Commercial retail is a tough one because retail got hit really hard by e-commerce trends. And then, office got hit really hard by work from home. But one of the things I really like about self-storage, one of the things I really like about industrial is that as far as I can see, there aren't these giant macro trends that are working against you. And in PI, there are. And in a ton of businesses, there are. I sort of see it as something, I could probably stay in one or two asset classes for 20 to 30 years and not have to worry about some existential threat to that business. They're simple businesses like plumbers. You will always need a plumber. Therefore, you will probably always need a multi-tenant industrial building or a large storage unit. But a plumber is not going to be disrupted in the same way.
The other thing about storage is it's tied to people's stuff. The American way is to buy more stuff. I call it stuff. It's shit, but it's stuff, right? So people are trained and conditioned, gotta buy more stuff, right? So when you buy stuff, you need a place to keep it. So you buy stuff and then there's this, what does that guy on Netflix call it? It's a phantom cost of, you gotta put that stuff somewhere, right? And that's what self-storage provides. People get emotionally attached to stuff. I happen to not. I could sell everything I own and not care at all. I'm not a stuff guy. So I find it interesting why you chose it. One, you had a good role model, right? I know your uncle, awesome guy, very business savvy, has multiple businesses. Your whole family, though, has got this entrepreneur gene that's fascinating to me.
Well,
you guys are sitting around.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You guys sit around a bonfire and it's all entrepreneurs making a ton of money. And they're all just really good at it. And you're doing what most families don't. You talk about money in a very commonplace way where most families avoid it. It's a topic of, I talk about it all the time with my family because it's just green paper to me. I don't have an emotional attachment to it, right? But I find it fascinating. Your whole family has this rich entrepreneurial history.
Well, I talked to my friend about this, and his mom, she worked for a newspaper, and her dad worked in sales for a company. And we were talking one day because we're always going on camping trips, and we're sitting around a fire one time, and I'm like, what did I'm with a couple guys. I'm like, what did your parents talk about? Like when you were talking with your parents and when you were with your family at a reunion and all your family came over, what did you guys talk about? And they were like, oh, well, we just talked about life or sports. And one of my friends, his parents had a construction company and they talk about the stuff they're building. And so that's an entrepreneurial business. They talk about that. Every single person in their family is involved in construction. But the W-2 employees, they didn't talk about work. They didn't talk about business or anything like that. But I was like, wow, is it weird that, hey, when I went to a campfire in Maine, when I'm going next week, spend 10 days there with all my family,
right?
The only thing we talk about, and I spent from 5 years old to now 27, is all we talked about was business. And it was, how can we get better? You learn a lot of new things. And it's really interesting learning, at least growing up, how people made money, because you realize Well, if you're never exposed to that, you would think that it's a very small number of people and there are a very small number of ways to make money. And the media sort of makes it seem like everyone's getting wealthy by like objectifying someone else or by putting someone else down. But when you realize, and when you're exposed to it a lot, you realize there are a million ways that people can make $1 million. Like there are just an incredible number of ways that people do it, and everyone's got their little niche, and it's incredibly interesting.
What's awesome about that, and I really love that, is basically since you were like a kid, have been attending entrepreneurial masterminds without putting a label on it, right? I go to masterminds with your father. And it's funny, during COVID, you know who I was on the phone with the most? Your uncle and your father. And we were talking about business plays, PPP, all of that stuff. And you grew up in that family. You're sitting around campfires, toasting marshmallows and having a scotch and a cigar. That's masterminding at the highest level. And so, yeah, it's no wonder that you went into it the way you did. I think it also speaks to one of the things that's a trait of yours and the other new breed entrepreneurs, right? And that's this. You went into a space on a $2.3 million deal as your first deal. Did you have any fear whatsoever?
I was terrified. I was so terrified. I remember, again, I was sitting by, we closed on that deal in December and I went on a camping trip. We got under contract in September. I was with my friends at a camping trip in November. And I remember sitting there around the fire and I was like, man, like, I'm crazy right now. Like, I'm insane. Like, this is like, and I remember sitting there and I was like, okay, I was thinking to myself, I've got these guys all.
And you got everybody's money tied up. This
may have been right after we got the money together, but this is before we closed. And I was like, look, how do I become if I were to be the absolute expert? And I wanted to 100% due diligence this more than anyone else, what would I do? So I just got out my phone. I'm sitting around a campfire and I just spent like 20 minutes writing down every single thing I would do to become the expert. And then once I got home, I did it. So it's, when you go on these camping trips, you're hiking, you sort of have time to think. But hey, you just spend a week in Vermont. I wrote down, hey, I'm going to contact every person on real estate Twitter who I follow, and I'm going to set up the call with them. Everyone who's done a self-storage deal, and I'm going to talk them through it. I'm going to walk them through my deal, and I'm going to get their opinion on it. And I'm going to ask them, here, what software do I need? And every little consideration, it was like, I had to become that complete subject matter expert before doing it. And by the time I was done with that, I could answer every question that you or anyone would throw at me about the business. And I didn't even own the business yet.
No, I think that's awesome. And you listen, this is why I love doing this long form content, right? Because you just gave us so much to unpack. And so I just want to unpack it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So one, you talked about going off into the woods. I've been doing that almost once or twice a month now because I'm solving business problems that I can't solve when I'm sitting in the office worrying about did Susie show up 10 minutes late. Mm-hmm. The fact that you're doing that so early on, right? That you did it in spite of being scared. You were scared, you did it anyway. Love that. And I think that comes from being part of the entrepreneurial family. Mm-hmm. Two, you made another discovery that you just said that it takes some entrepreneurs decades to realize. Me and your father just coming around to the fact that taking what I call slack time to work on the business where you are cut off. You did that list in a half an hour on your phone. Mm-hmm. That's a really important discovery, dude. That's a really important discovery. So you're spitting a lot of wisdom with that also. And then the last thing I just took just from this 1 5-minute thing you told us was you wanted to be an expert. That's where I think it sets you apart, where people have to realize like, yeah, you can hockey stick your net worth. Ryan, what is within the self-storage niche, other than the numbers? I know you always look for a certain ROI and that. What is the niche within the niche, which is mismanaged or undervalued properties, right? Like almost making yourself a turnaround expert. So describe what characteristics you look for that are both in the numbers and or your inspections or whatever else. What is the niche within the niche that you look for?
So the traditional play that was like hey, this is the easy money mark-to-market play, which we did the first one, was, hey, this property is 100% full. Everyone else in the market's 100% full. We just need to increase the rents to the market rate. And literally within, we bought this property. We closed on December 6th. By March 31st, we had done 27. We closed at doing $20,000 a month in revenue. March 26th, or March 31st, we had done 27,000 a month in revenue. By August, we had done 30,000. So the play was very simple. We just marked to market. Now that play is like, everyone sees that now. And so what we see is, let's take that everyone else is full mantra, everyone else's rates are higher, and find the property that's at 50% full. And why are they at 50% full? And if the answer is they don't have a website, they don't answer the phone, you can't book online, they don't have 7 days a week support, and they're not doing any advertising, then that is a really compelling investment for us. Our investment in Woodstock, we've got a self-storage facility there. They didn't have any website. I could not get their person on the phone. They were sitting at 55% occupancy, their revenue was at around $14,000 a month. We did $26,000 last month, and we're at 82% occupancy. And we've been leasing it, in 7 months, we've gone from 58 to 86% occupancy. And, we've got a similar deal in Alabama, which is going along pretty similarly there. And it's really, now it's more of a, why is this property occupied badly? It's basically the owner just has got too much other stuff going on. So that's a real good opportunity.
So you go in, see these properties that are at 50% occupancy, and mainly because they're not doing the proper steps to get those spaces filled. And then you go set them up with like a seamless website, make sure people are there to answer their questions, and then build up the occupancy from there.
Yeah. And the thing is,
do you turn around and sell them?
Do I plan to sell them eventually?
Yeah.
We haven't sold any of them yet. Right now, we've got on 80,000 of our 100,000 square feet, we've got 4% debt locked in. Average term of our debt is 10 years, or is like 12 years. We got a long-term debt. And
when you start talking like this, I fall in love with you. I fall in love with you. I'm like, this is why somebody who knows real estate investing said to me and Jules on a podcast, if you trust the operator, man, life is good. And I'm like, I've known your dad so long that I've kind of by proxy known you since you were like knee high, basically, even though I didn't see you at that point in your life. But man, I don't know. I just had a comfort level like you, but you were the expert. You understood numbers and the importance of that. And so 100,000 square feet, 4% debt, dude. At
that point, if you solely look at our principal payback, well, yes, we could sell and we could roll, perhaps we could sell and we could roll that money. If we could sell, self-storage is kind of crazy right now. You could probably sell your storage facilities at a 6 cap. You could buy triple net industrial at a 7 cap, which means basically you can trade a 6% return for a 7% return, equal or better asset class. You should totally do that. But on that next deal, I would probably be getting 7% debt on that. And so just with that 4% debt, like if you just look at our principal pay down, say we pay down, just for example, this is not how amortization works, but say we got a 25-year loan, we're paying back 1/25 of that in principal each year. And on top of that, we only have to pay 4% of the outstanding balance in debt. It's so that principal pay down piece, that way we get more of the property. It's the cheapest. We're never going to be able to own 1/25 of a property for only 4% debt each year. We can't do that right now. We'd have to pay 7%. And what that looks like is the difference of paying $4,000 and $7,000 a month on like $1 million loan. Just these numbers are made up. But the point is, you increased your debt cost. Basically, the cost went up by like 60, 70%. So as long as we can, it behooves us to keep paying down debt at 4% because we get so much out of it because we're paying down that principal. And it's just, the cash on cash plus principal reserves are very high. Returns are very high. There are a lot of people who want to flip out of deals. And anything we do, we plan on 1031ing or doing an opportunity zone fund. But I don't have any, a lot of times, hey, does the sponsor want this money? Does the sponsor want a new house? Is the sponsor getting divorced? Does the sponsor want a BMW? Like everything, all of my goals align with creating around $50 million in value for myself and sort of using that as just letting the snowball run rather than trading in and out of things.
What's funny, though, is knowing the pool of people that you're dealing with, we're almost all the same mindset, right?
Yeah, everyone wants that. Everyone wants to keep rolling that snowball rather than sort of trading it up.
No one is short-term to go buy something fancy. No one is short-term for the flip. They're just not. It's a long-term, long-tail picture, which, again, I think that's awesome.
And there's a lot to be said for, hey, Tom, if you're a startup, you may raise a bunch of money. You may need a big capital infusion event to go grow. But the way I see real estate is not, I don't see real estate as if there's it's very hard to scale, and the benefits of scale aren't super there for me. Like we can do, if we can create, call it $5 million in shareholder value, in equity value, and we can buy $10 million a year in properties, and we can create $3 million or $4 million a year in equity. Like if I hired another couple people, could I get to 20, 30 million? I don't think it will scale that way because I'm sort of an integral part. It's more, and I actually really enjoy doing the deals. I'm still at that phase of my life where I'm doing that, and I don't really trust anyone else to run them. So like you can hire a lawyer to run a deal. I'm still the guy. The only difference is like, if you compared it to PI, I'm sort of like a trucking lawyer, and I'm only taking those big $5 million, $10 million, $15 million trucking cases, and the profits are really, really high, but I only have to focus on a couple cases at any one point in time.
You're a boutique. You're a boutique.
Right. I've looked into like, hey, during 2022, I really everyone was buying in 2022. We didn't buy a single thing, nothing penciled. And we couldn't get anything to pencil, but everyone else was really, really buying. And I tried, I was like, what could I do if I just got more money? And the equation was not solved by getting more capital. The equation was solved by lying or misrepresenting facts to investors or betting on insane rent growth that is actually today.
Can I just say something? I got to interrupt you for a second. One of the things that has always pissed me off, and you guys know, like, certain things I got a hair trigger for, right? Mm-hmm. You're a GP. Most of the deals, if not all the deals, you got skin in the game. I know a lot of GPs that don't.
I personally guarantee it. But yeah, got skin in the game.
What makes me nuts is I watched exactly go on what you were doing, and I watched other people doing it. I've had plenty of other people over my years come to me. A, they weren't putting skin in the game. B, they're willing to buy shitty deals because it's not their money. Right? And I've seen you talk about that on Twitter. If anybody's not following Ryan, by the way, on Twitter, and you want to learn about real estate, man, him and his boys on Twitter and his ladies on Twitter are fire. Ryan, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Ryan at Redwood Storage. Just type in Redwood Storage, Ryan at Redwood Storage, Redwood Ryan, any of those will work.
I've learned so much about the space just from following you and then a lot of the guys that you interact with. But your Twitter account is actually really a great resource for people that want to get into real estate. Again, Jules, you always say you want to get into real estate. He's a guy to follow on Twitter, right? That's his space, by the way. He's not a LinkedIn guy. He's a Twitter guy.
And Twitter works out really well for you. Like, I don't know a lot of people who get a lot of traction on Twitter, but you actually do. So it's very interesting to see.
The thing about
Twitter, puts up some volatile stuff. That's why.
I don't have the energy. Like, it's funny. I've got a big investor of mine who I really respect. He messages me and he's like, I appreciate that you're not an asshole like some of these other guys on Twitter. And I'm like, and then, a couple months later, I start putting out engagement stuff that gets people riled up. And just to see, honestly, Twitter's algorithm, the way it works is if you're sort of more negative, then you get more likes. Right. But then you sort of turn off those people who lurk in the background who are actually smart investors like yourself. Not that you get a lot of the little peons following you, but you don't get a lot of the smart people following you when you do that stuff.
But I think what's cool about it is you put out stuff that's really succinct that then you go back and you think about, like, you put in something, should I really make a video about why this deal should never pencil? Yeah. Right? And I'm like, I was looking at the numbers. I'm like, this is awesome. I learned so much from that type of content, and it's short bursts, but it's interesting. So
I want to touch on one thing that you said about meeting experts. And I think about this a lot, like becoming the expert in it. In real estate is very different than law. In my experience, because we'll probably touch on this at some point. As long as you have the time.
Yeah.
So with the law firm, my goal was do the same exact thing as storage. I want to meet the absolute experts who are crushing it in personal injury law. The people whose marketing is off the charts and they're beating everyone and they're blowing everyone out of the water. And in real estate, that was very easy to do. Like people are, think about the type of person who is a real estate entrepreneur. You have to be very friendly in real estate. Like you have to be open to meeting hundreds of investors and talking to hundreds of people about their properties and becoming friends with all sellers.
Most lawyers ain't like that.
Most lawyers are not like that. And so there's definitely this, like getting into law with my parents' law firm and helping them with marketing. I was basically like, I want to help them up their marketing by a lot. Well, I need to become an expert in the marketing. And I feel like I've learned a ridiculous amount, but getting in touch with experts in law it's two parts. You sort of have to become part of a group. Like they're not very open to share. In general, not super open to share, not like real estate. And then second, it's very interesting because the experts are all, at least in my experience, it's been much more of a, well, they haven't really done anything super unique to do well, or the things that they've done very unique don't scale, and our firm isn't willing to do it. I'll give you an example. You had Herb on the pod, and you guys were talking about the things he did, and he's talking about the most important things he did was invest into his website and do SEO. And you did that far enough back, and you worked on that. Then you're a top guy today. If you did that in 1995, in 2000, then you're going to be a top person in 2023. But imagine coming out of law school today and saying, I'm going to be the number one guy in PI in Long Island by having a website.
Yeah,
it's not even.
I got to be honest with you. I spoke to a guy yesterday who's out 2 years, and he's referring me 2 cases off of LinkedIn. And when I was talking to him, he's like, you guys are doing something really special that no law firms are doing on social media. If I was coming out of law school tomorrow, I don't know if I'd even have a website or SEO. I think I would be all in on social. You and I could go back and forth about whether it's worth the time or not. I will tell you that it is a lot of time, but there's a lot of traction on it. And it's residual. Like Jules and I were going back and forth. She's been uploading YouTube shorts to our YouTube channel. And we got like 18,000 views, 18,000 views actually, that I sent her last night on stuff she's creating. People want to be informed. People want to be entertained. Those 2 things, right? So are lawyers entertaining? No. I don't know. Probably not. But if you've got a personality where like, I like talking to your dad. If your dad can do it in an authentic way, we both follow somebody on social media and he just comes across so inauthentic, we can't really jive with his content, right?
I totally agree with you. You have to be special. Now, in today's world, you have to be very special. I'm going to give an example of Michael A. DeMeo. He's the biggest guy in Charlotte, biggest advertiser. He's been doing TV ads for 20 years. And call it Herb, Auger and Auger. If you look on Google, in Charlotte, we're typically between the top 1 and 3. And all of our cases come through Google Maps, Google Search. And that's because we've got 20 years of being there. And we were one of the first people. If you wanted to start today, you could not get to that level of success in 20 years by just doing social media, by just having a website, by just answering the phone. If you listen to his podcast, he goes, we answered the phone. Now it's like, if you do exactly those things, then you have the possibility of getting a case. In self-storage, self-storage is where PI was 20 years ago, where by doing that website and by answering the phones, you actually have a competitive advantage.
You will be long retired by the time, you will be very wealthily retired at that point, because by having the tech background you have, man, that skill set. Let's talk about that for a second, because you made a comment. Let's think about this for a second. You made a comment like it's really difficult in the law to find those experts, right? AKA a mentor.
Right.
And here's why, because I've studied this. 1, you have to buy in. Buy in means paying money, thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, to get into the right masterminds or with the right coaching outfits, because people just don't have time. That's one of the questions I had for you, because I know a lot of attorneys listen to this, right? You're 27 years old. You're a stud at this stuff. How much have you spent time, money, or both on your after-school expertise? You didn't go to school to become a real estate guy, but you built up your net worth as a real estate guy. How much money, time, and I'm talking about travel to the masterminds you belong to, all of the stuff you do with the real estate stuff, how much time, money, or both have you spent after school to develop your expertise as a real estate investor?
So if we talk about real estate, I haven't gotten to that level with law where I'm doing this, but with real estate, I was at the level of, I would go hop on a plane to go meet someone, and it would be free. They would not charge me money, but it would be like, I would have a coffee or I'd have a breakfast with them, and I'd be like, okay, it's at 9:00. I could fly in the night before to meet that. And I wouldn't tell them that I was doing this, but they would agree to meet. They may live in Dallas and I'm in Charlotte, but I would fly in because I'm going to go meet that person. And that's how valuable that conversation was. They're not going to charge me. And so the cost was never in masterminds. In real estate, the mastermind groups are all, in my opinion, like borderline fraudulent. And it's always the house flippers, people who are trying to get into it. I've been to all the groups, and it's never people at the high level. People at the high level want you to reach out to them and show some value and then set up a time to meet. Like, they're not going to these events.
Oh my God. Like, dude, that is something that I wish that's going to stay in this podcast, and we're going to put that on repeat. Like, that is solid gold. I have this new saying I've been saying, Ryan, and you're just like the embodiment of it. My firm, we do things that others don't, which is why we get results that others won't. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what you're encapsulating in that statement. Like, holy shit, man, this guy's flying across the country to have a cup of coffee with somebody.
You know, after you go out and have a cup of coffee with these guys, what's the next step after that?
Typically, I've got a bunch of questions and I want to learn about what they do and why they do it. And I mean, I sometimes have follow-up stuff, but at least in terms of real estate, in my opinion, the groups are typically, groups, if you're paying for a group, they are trying to make money off of that course, and they're then trying to get you to sign up to invest with them or to buy another course off them. And if there's all these different courses that are, the whole goal is to get them to invest with you. And that's what ends up happening.
What would you say is your number one biggest needle mover in your career at the point you're at now at 27 years old, just overall?
Going forward, or things that have moved the needle in the past?
Right now, like, dude, you're sitting on a net worth that most people dream of. Dude, call it what it is. Like, in America, you're already in rarefied air. Like, dude, guys like me are always going to want to bet on you because look at what you've done at 27 years old, right? So what would you say was your number one biggest needle mover? That could be anything. It could be your family network.
Let me zoom back. I want to take a step back because I have a friend of mine, and look, I worked my first job I told you about. I was working at, software engineer. Mm-hmm. It was a startup, and the startup did not work out. The startup never ended up doing well. We built the product, it didn't sell. After that, I went and started this restaurant tech company, and COVID hit. And we were in a bunch of restaurants, but COVID hit. That didn't work out. And then I'm working for I worked for another startup, and it's a glucose monitoring company, and the product worked, but it didn't work as well enough. There's an issue with the product and the product market fit. And I remember a really good friend of mine, he said to me, well, they say you've got to fail a bunch of times, and you're sort of already done it. So at least that's good. And I remember being like, we laughed about it. And I was like, maybe you're right. Maybe I've sort of matured a little bit and have learned. And in the past, where I would jump right into things without thinking, I'm much more analytical in that, hey, find the 10 experts and learn everything about it before you go in. Like, due diligence the ever living crap out of it so that a professional investor like yourself or other professional investors could just quiz the hell out of me and hammer on me, and I could know the answers to all these questions. I would say that going from me in 2019 or 2017 when I was working with these startups, the biggest difference has been the level I due diligence things.
Awesome. So listen, real quick. You gave us a roadmap, and Jules, I want to give a bunch of action steps. There's like 10 action steps. How do you become rich before you're 30? How do you have it? And when I define rich, I say net worth, which allows you to do what you want when you want, right? Ryan worked from Hawaii for like 3 weeks, right? So here's the action steps that Ryan just gave us, and I'm saving them to the end because people got to listen to the very end of the podcast. What did Ryan do to get there? 1, he found mentors, right? Not just one, many. 2, he trusted them, right? I have people in the past that come to me to mentor them, but they don't trust me. Okay, well, then I'm not going to spend my time. I don't need to do that. 3, become an expert, right? He invested time, money, travel, inconvenience. Guy could have been out with his girlfriend for the weekend. He's flying across the country to go have a cup of coffee on a Monday morning. Talking to people, a lot of people. What's that?
I said, yeah, she loved that. She loved me disappearing.
Well, listen, man, I said to my wife, like, hey, man, I get to hobnob with all these attorneys from now till December at all these masterminds. You good with me going? She's like, go, because it furthers our future vision for our family, right? What we want for our family, which is very similar to the vision your father and your mom have. Talking to a lot of people that are experts in this space. He built up this tremendous circle on Twitter. And that takes a lot of time. As somebody who's very active on LinkedIn, it takes a lot of time to build up that space and then establish yourself as the expert. He found a way to deliver. This is the next step. Found a way to deliver immediate value. He didn't come out to a guys like me and his father and say, listen, I need a couple $1 million. No. That's not the way that it works. Have a business plan in place. His business plan is the financial on a real estate deal. He's already an expert. He understands the lingo, the numbers, all of that. So he found a way to deliver immediate value, right? He found market differentiators. That's the next step, right? There's 1 million people who have great ideas. Tell me you've got something different in the market. He looks for these niche properties, and then within that niche, he looks for underdeveloped or under-marketed or just mismanaged properties. And he says to me, in 3 months, this is going to go from $27,000 to $33,000 in rent roll. You got my attention. Oh, and the 4% debt. Now you really got my attention. Like all of these different things that, he's doing. Next step, eliminate short-term thinking, right? He's not thinking, am I going to get rich by 27? He's like, what's the play? What is the value I can deliver in the marketplace? He just happened to get rich by 27 because he has this much longer window view. And I think that actually comes from your family, Ryan, because you're surrounded by entrepreneurs. It's not about, am I buying a shiny thing tomorrow? Right?
No, that's very true. And
no short-term thinking.
It's one of those things where it's like, well, if I didn't have sort of the, I sort of have if everything were to blow up, I could go sleep on my parents' or my grandparents' couch. Like worst case scenario, like I have a family safety net. So I don't there's no need for me to think short term. Like I don't need to keep $500,000 in reserves or this giant reserve. I don't need to go sell anything and put it away under the bed in case of a rainy day happens. Like if something, if all of a sudden I got hit by a bus, well, my fiance is a veterinarian and she does well. And then, and my family, I would be okay. But a lot of people can't say that.
Right. Well, a lot of people be okay. They probably could say it, but they're scared to say it. Right. That's one. Two, you also brought up probably the last big needle mover, and I'm not even sure you did it. I said it before. I'm going to say it to you, Jules. Who you marry will be the single biggest indicator of whether you're going to achieve great things or not. And it won't make sense to a lot of people listening to this till they hit my age. I'm going to be 55 next week. It's a big needle mover, right? Ryan's got a very stable relationship. He's getting married. When are you getting married?
May.
Nice.
That's
so
exciting.
He's getting married in May. His fiance is wonderful. She's got a stable career and she's passionate about what she does. Right. So of course they're going to be a power couple. Forget about being ridiculously good looking, both of them. It makes me sick because I'm not that guy anymore, but they are, salt of the earth people. But listen to the last 10 minutes of this again and write it down because he gave you you ask me all the time. He gave you the roadmap, action steps that you can take.
I want to add 2 more things to that.
Yeah, please.
People reach out to me all the time asking for advice and how do I do this? Or I want to get into real estate and everything. And maybe if 30 people have reached out, one person has done actually incredibly well. He owns 50,000, 60,000 square feet of storage now. He's doing fantastic. He's a guy named Charles out of Atlanta. And he's the one person who would ever ask specific questions. Most people say, oh, I want to pick your brain. This guy did enough research so that the questions he asked, he knew I was the expert on. For example, the number of people who ask you the high level stuff, I just want to pick your brain. Tell me your story. It's you can go listen to my podcast. You can go on my website. You can read me on Twitter. Really, you're asking for generic info and you're just poking around. But the people who do well are the ones who you can sort of figure it out from reading and learning. You can figure out the general information. But then when you go in and you ask specific questions to mentors, that tells them, wow, you're actually you've done the research. You're not asking me for the 101 course. You're asking me for the 500 level, senior level course. And you want to know this exact specific thing. That means you're actually going to do it. And he's done incredibly well. And just is the only one. Whenever someone asks
specific questions,
exactly. And whenever someone, and that's what I do when I'm talking to any mentor. I'm not tell me how you get started. Why do you do this? Those are podcast questions. That's good. Those are for a general audience. But when you're doing, it's the difference. That person has really invested time into learning all the ground stuff so they can learn the advanced stuff. And you need to be advanced to be successful. And then the second thing would be find inefficient markets. There are a ton of inefficient markets. Real estate is an inefficient market. Some markets are more efficient. Multifamily, super efficient. Self-storage is less efficient, meaning inefficient means pricing isn't efficient and the operators are not doing a great job. There's a guy on Twitter called Sweaty Startup who talks about this all the time.
Yeah, I follow him, yeah.
Find someone who's doing great and making $1 million a year in profit, who's using a fax machine, doesn't have a website, and doesn't answer the phone on the weekends or after 5. And if you can find that business, then you're going to do, and you can compete with the 2021 set of tools. PI is the most competitive business that I have seen. It is wildly competitive. Just to get one case, if you want one case a year, you need everything set up. You need to be answering the phone 24/7. You need marketing spend, this and that. But in a lot of the blue collar businesses and a lot of other businesses, you don't need to be doing that. You can do the basic stuff and do incredibly well because everyone else they still may have a beeper. They're still getting faxes. And I would search for those markets rather than, if you're starting up, rather than trying to compete. Don't try to compete with the guy with 50 billboards. Like in law, you've got to be like Ali and do something different.
I would say to anybody listening to this, do a stream analysis. Do you really want just one case? Or who is it in the same stream of the vein of cases now where there might be upsell opportunities or profitability increase opportunities where it's just 1 or 2 phone calls away, right? And that's what took me from one doctor with one file and a PI silo all the way up to 350, 400 no-fault clients, institutional, some of them publicly held, and 14,000 files, right? So, man, dude, listen, I knew having you on was going to be a trip, man. Like, you're 27 with the wisdom of like a 70-year-old financial dynamo. That's why we started this podcast. I have these interesting conversations with people all the time. Guys like you, ladies like Jules, and just people that are doing these extraordinary things, regardless of age, regardless of financial limitations. They don't see them as stopping points. You guys are just doing crazy good stuff. So thank you again for coming on. I'm psyched to read the article about you. And is the best way for people to get a hold of you through Twitter?
Yeah, go to my website. It's got a contact form. You can fill that out. Follow me on Twitter and just send me a DM. Just send me a note. My DMs are open. Ryan at Redwood Storage. Redwood Ryan A is my little handle, but you search me, I'll pop up. I've got a little blue check mark, and I'm wearing a red shirt that's just like this.
Awesome. What we will do is put all that information in the show notes. Ryan, thanks again, buddy. I really
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much. This was awesome.